There is an immense amount of parity in the NFL. Sure, people like to dog on the league for having the Patriots in the Super Bowl just about every year, but they are very clearly the exception and not the rule when it comes to continued success. I mean, the Patriots have managed to tie the record for most Super Bowls held by a single franchise with 6 all in the last 20 years, and even through that completely dominant span, there have still been 10 other different teams to take home the Lombardi Trophy, sometimes multiple in a few cases. It's one of those things that makes football so interesting, how hard it can be to predict any given matchup, because when you're talking about a game being played entirely by professionals, there's no such thing as a sure thing. However, the reason we are here today is to discuss the times when there really is a sure thing in spite of that fact, because sometimes an organization for one reason or another can't find a way to field a professional caliber football team. This rings especially true when looking at the inspiration for this video in the 2019 Miami Dolphins, who have been outscored 102-10 through their first 2 games, both of which were at home. There's no doubt that if the Dolphins keep up this pace, they'll claim the spot handily as the worst team of all time, and I'll be honest, their commitment to shipping off their last talented players seems to indicate that's a possibility. However, I'm not really much of a psychic, so I'm not going to try and guess at whether or not they'll end the gauntlet completely winless like the teams we're going to be talking about today. But if they manage to keep up this level of embarrassment, rest assured this video is going to need an update. For the purpose of this video though, we'll be talking about the 3 winless, tieless teams in NFL history, and ranking them according to how pathetic their entire season was from back to front. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, then stick around. But before I show you some of the worst football I've ever seen, let me flip things around and tell you about the best way to create a website, and that is with Squarespace. For those of you who haven't heard of them before, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to help build a sleek, professional website with only a few mouse clicks needed. They have templates that easily accommodate whatever style you're looking to build around, whether that's a blog, a band, an online store, you name it. And regardless of what you're creating, they've got every tool you'd need to bring your website to life. Features like video backgrounds, built-in mobile layouts for each template, tons of different fonts and customization, and even a built-in logo designer ensure that you'll be able to create and launch a gorgeous website in just a matter of hours. If you're ready to take your presence online to the next level, then head on over to Squarespace to start up a free trial and check out their service. And then whenever you're ready to launch, click the pinned link down below in order to get 10% off your first purchase on a website or domain. Again, that's squarespace.com/settheedge to turn your ideas into online realities. So without further delay, let's dive straight into the dumpster fire with the 1976 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now the Bucs are more of an honorable mention to the top 2 on this list, but I wanted to include Tampa Bay's inaugural season because this is probably the worst team ever fielded in a modern NFL game. There was no free agency when the Bucs were created, so they had to be constructed out of an expansion draft and waiver wire additions, so they weren't exactly well equipped to succeed out of the gate. That's a little bit of an understatement though, considering they did go 0-14 in their first season as a pro football club, and put up some of the saddest statistics imaginable. Each of their games were lost by an average of 20.5 points, they were shut out in 5 out of 14 games, and they averaged less than 9 points per game on the whole season. Possibly the only good thing to come out of the sheer embarrassment that was Tampa Bay's early football team were the quotes from head coach John McKay. My personal favorite is, "We'll be back. Maybe not this century, but we'll be back." In the end, that's why the Bucs get let off the hook, because you don't necessarily expect an expansion team to go winless, but if a team goes winless, you'd expect it to be an expansion team. So my cherished Bucs are getting a free pass on this one. Plus, they did end up back the next century, winning a Super Bowl in 2003, so good call on the prediction, John. The same, however, cannot be said for our next team, who we don't have to travel too far in the past to take a look at. I'm talking, of course, about the 2017 Cleveland Browns, who managed to spin a 1-15 record in 2016 into a full-blown 0-16 season the very next year. That kind of losing is unprecedented and spectacular, but to understand what makes this Browns team so uniquely bad, we need to understand the root of all failure for an NFL franchise, and that's the front office. See, a team is never truly incompetent as long as they've got sound ownership and a savvy GM to work alongside the needs of their coach, but the Browns opted for a very different strategy in chasing after future success. Their owner Jimmy Haslam, who is hated for a variety of reasons, brought in Sashi Brown to take up the helm as executive VP of football operations for the team, giving him full control of the roster and the majority of decisions surrounding the organization. It was a move that would prove to be for the long game, as Brown was much more analytics-minded and adopted the strategy that Sam Hinkie's 76ers used to bottom out their franchise and try and secure better players for the future, often by shipping out veterans and creating more cap room by hollowing out the roster overall. It did work. The Browns acquired a ton of picks and a ton of cap space that they'd later use, but they also made a bad team completely unwatchable in the process. After that miserable 1-15 season in 2016, head coach Hugh Jackson promised that the Browns would not go 1-15 again. For what it's worth, he didn't lie, because the Browns joined that very difficult to enter 0-16 club their very next season. It's not that they didn't try. They finished 6 games where they lost by a touchdown or less, with 2 of those games in overtime. It's really more of a matter of the fact that they were built to lose. They were extremely shallow on both sides of the ball, letting experienced players walk away, and then leaning on a rookie project quarterback in DeShone Kizer that was thrown to the Lions in week 1 with no help around him and no competent coaching staff to inspire any growth as a team. That 2017 Browns team had a lot of potential, considering it had 17 rookies, but it wasn't really meant to be tapped yet, and a concoction of a league worst in both 14.6 points per game and 41 total turnovers helped them secure the #1 pick in football, though it didn't come without the price of becoming a national joke in the process, even more so than the Browns already were. But while the 2017 Cleveland Browns were an embarrassment to anyone with eyes, they did what they were technically supposed to do. The roster hadn't been improved, the coaching hadn't been improved, and the focus still remained on a bigger, brighter future out in the distance. But for the last team on this list, what sets them apart is how they managed to take a group with middle-of-the-road aspirations and flip those meager expectations completely to become the textbook definition of ineptitude as an NFL team. You and I both know who it is, so let's get to talking about the 2008 Detroit Lions. Unlike the 0-16 Browns, who were built to fail, the Lions failed in spite of attempting to build themselves to win. Their general manager had been in the franchise for 7 years with very questionable results, but their head coach Rod Marinelli had just transitioned his team from 3-13 to 7-9 in his first 2 seasons, and the team was talking like they were ready to be taken seriously again after not posting a winning record since 2000. Unfortunately for them, the absolute inverse occurred. Their point differential at -241 is one of the worst in NFL history, allowing over 32 points per game on average in each and every contest. While in many ways they were quantifiably worse than the 2017 Browns, like total offense, total defense, or even scoring defense, their legacy will also carry a longer lasting impression. The closest game they played all year was a 12-10 loss in Minnesota against the Vikings. Where did the Vikings get those 2 points to edge out the Lions, you ask? Well, from a self-inflicted safety from Lions quarterback Dan Orlovsky, who avoided being sacked by Jared Allen by simply running out of the back of the end zone. It's still the perfect image of the 2008 Lions train wreck of a season. Self-inflicted suffering to the highest degree. Let's also not forget that they had one of the greatest receiving talents of all time in Calvin Johnson playing for them, who accounted for over 31% of all yardage generated by the Lions offense over the course of the season, in just his second year. To make matters worse, on Thanksgiving Day they were beaten down in their own stadium 47-10 by the Tennessee Titans in front of children and families all across the nation. There's no one that wants to watch that with grandma. This wasn't just a bad team, it was a broken one, fundamentally, that went through 3 different quarterbacks throughout the season with the aforementioned Calvin Johnson and still managed the 3rd least passing yards in the entire NFL. But it went beyond the football field too. One of the biggest headlines out of Detroit all year was an instance where defensive coordinator Joe Barry was brought up to their head coach, who happened to be his father-in-law. The question that began a media circus was, do you ever wish your daughter married a better defensive coordinator? That was certainly a below-the-knees blow, and the writer responsible would later resign, as he probably should have, but it all goes to show how pathetic the 2008 Lions were. They didn't respect themselves, and they weren't respected by anybody else either. And in the end, coupling that with the fact that no one expected them to be that horrific makes them the worst team in NFL history. So there you have it, a quick rundown of the most terrible teams to take an NFL field. But even though the 2008 Lions are a tough act to follow, as NFL history presses on, there is only one thing that the football gods guarantee each and every year, and that is even more sadness.